Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC Vegas 71, and in the main event, we have an amazing heavyweight matchup, Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction. I'm a little bit disappointed that this fight is being held at the UFC Apex, and I also think it's a massive factor in this fight, and we'll talk about that later when I get to my prediction. But this also just deserves to be in front of fans. This deserves to be in a live arena because this is a massive fight in the heavyweight division. I mean, you have Pavlovich versus Blaydes, two top 5 heavyweights, and you may very well be looking at a future heavyweight champion because right now the heavyweight division is kind of in a weird spot. You have Jon Jones, who just returned after a 3-year layoff to now win the heavyweight title against Cyril Gane. But he's hinted at he wants to fight Stipe Miocic, which supposedly is going to happen in November at Madison Square Garden. And then he's hinted at retirement. So Jon Jones could beat Stipe in November, then retire. But then also if Stipe Miocic wins, there's a chance he retires. And even if he doesn't retire, he'll probably sit out for 2 years and go back to answering phones at the fire department. And I feel like no matter what happens with that fight, the winner of this fight is going to be competing for the heavyweight championship in their next fight. It could be a vacant belt. It could be an interim belt. It could be against Jon Jones if Jon Jones decides to stick around. But nonetheless, this is a #1 contender fight in the heavyweight division, and it's a very interesting stylistic matchup. Basically, striker versus grappler. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. We'll talk about that later. But I love this matchup. It has massive ramifications in the division. And also, when's the last time Sergei Pavlovich has been in a boring fight? He's never in a boring fight. And Curtis Blaydes, he's not the most exciting fighter ever, but it's very rare that him himself is in a boring fight as well. So this fight pretty much has it all. It has massive ramifications. You know, the winner of the fight is going to be fighting for a heavyweight title, most likely in their next fight. It's going to be an exciting fight, and both guys are of an elite skill set. So I'm just really looking forward to this matchup, and I feel like it should be in front of a live crowd. But if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Sergei Pavlovich is 17-1, Curtis Blaydes is 17-3. Pavlovich is ranked number 3, Blaydes is ranked number 4 in the UFC official rankings. Pavlovich is 30 years old, Blaydes is 32. Pavlovich is 6'3", Blaydes is 6'4". Pavlovich has an 84-inch reach, and Blaydes has an 80-inch reach. So a 1-inch height advantage for Curtis Blaydes and a 4-inch reach advantage for Sergei Pavlovich. So if you look at Curtis Blaydes, he has 17 pro MMA wins, 12 by knockout, 5 by decision, and he has 3 losses, all via TKO or KO. He comes into this fight on a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight was in July of 2022. And it's essentially meaningless. He has a win over Tom Aspinall, but we really didn't get to see the fight play out. It only lasted 15 seconds. Curtis Blaydes landed some good shots in that 15 seconds, but Tom Aspinall throws a kick, then he steps back on his leg, on his knee, and his knee just completely blows out. And then they wheel him out of the cage on the world's smallest chair, but that's besides the point. And so we really didn't get any definitive answers. We don't really know how that fight would have went. It's not like we got a round or two before the injury. The injury happened in the first 30 seconds of the fight. So it's not like you can say, oh, Curtis Blaydes looked amazing in that fight because we really didn't get to see it play out. So it's essentially a meaningless fight. The fight before that was March of last year against Chris Daukaus. He beat him in the striking in the first round, never shot in on a takedown, which a lot of people thought he was going to do. And then in the second round, clipped him with a big shot and put him out, finished him via KO in the second round. And in that fight, he didn't use his grappling at all. He only used his striking. And his striking, feel like every time out, his striking looks ever evolving. The fight before that, he beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, he won this fight by mixing in his grappling, but I would say about 30 to 40% of this fight was contested on the feet. And Curtis Blaydes, because of the threat of the takedown, because he has the wrestling in his back pocket, his striking looked very good. And he went out there, landed some good shots on Jairzinho, took Jairzinho down, controlled him on the ground, and won the fight 30-27, unanimous decision. His last loss was back in February of 2021, so a little over 2 years ago, and he fought Derek Lewis. And Derek Lewis just defies all odds, or at least he used to. And the first round was all Curtis Blaydes. He was jabbing, he was chopping the legs of Derek Lewis, and Curtis Blaydes never shot in on a takedown in that first round. Second round, he shot it on a takedown, but it was like a half-hearted attempt. Didn't seem like he was actually trying to get it, and then went back to striking. And then again in the second round, he shot it on a second takedown, telegraphed it, Derek Lewis saw it coming a mile away, throws like an uppercut, lands with like the top of his hand, and brutally KOs Curtis Blaydes out cold. Nasty follow-up shots. He shot from distance, and he ended up paying for it. That was his last loss. Then you're starting to get to, older wins against Alexander Volkov, where he out-wrestled him. Then you get a win over Junior Dos Santos back in January of 2020, where he actually TKO'd Junior Dos Santos. But again, it was the threat of the takedown that really got him to that TKO, using his hands and striking with Junior Dos Santos. His only other 2 losses in MMA are to former champion Francis Ngannou. One was back in 2018, where the fight was competitive. He gets clipped with a massive right hand. Then he gets finished with ground and pound, nasty ground and pound shots. TKO win for Francis Ngannou in the first round. And then the other loss to Francis Ngannou was back in 2016. And this fight was actually very competitive, but Curtis Blaydes' eyes started to swell shut, and the doctor stopped it. So ultimately, it was a TKO via doctor stoppage for Francis Ngannou, which is crazy because Curtis Blaydes has 3 losses, and all of them are to nuclear punchers. And, 2 losses to Francis Ngannou and 1 loss to Derek Lewis, all of them via TKO or KO. Very important. When you look at Sergei Pavlovich, he has 17 pro MMA wins, 14 by knockout, 3 by decision. He comes into this fight on a 5-fight winning streak, but also a 5-fight KO or TKO first round win streak. All of his last 5 fights have ended with him winning in the first round via KO or TKO. His last fight was against Tai Tuivasa in December of last year. Just clipped Tai Tuivasa on the feet, swarmed Tai Tuivasa, and finished him with shots as Tai Tuivasa is just seated up against the cage. The fight before that, he TKO'd Derek Lewis. This was in July of last year. There was some controversy surrounding this because Derek Lewis, got clipped with a big shot, and then Pavlovich started to swarm and missed a lot of follow-up shots. Then he landed one good shot. Derek Lewis kind of went face down. The ref stopped it. Derek Lewis pops right back up and starts complaining. But ultimately, I don't have a problem with the stoppage because if you're going face down and you're kissing the mat, it's probably a good time to be stopped. And maybe Derek Lewis was just off balance and he got hit with a big shot. But nonetheless, I have no problem with it because I think Pavlovich was going to finish him anyway. The fight before that was against Shamil Abdurakhimov. Similar situation. Hits him, swarms him, finishes him via TKO in the first round. Same thing against Maurice Green. Same thing against Marcelo Gome. The story of Sergei Pavlovich's UFC wins are all the same. First round KO or TKO. He hurts him on the feet and then he swarms him. He has unbelievable killer instinct and he's always looking for the finish. If he clips you and he gets you in trouble, he will swarm you and look for the finish. His only loss in the UFC and in his MMA career comes against Alistair Overeem back in November of 2018. And Alistair Overeem was able to take him down and TKO him with ground and pound shots. Once he took him down, I believe he tripped him down. Basically, he had nothing to offer off his back, and Alistair Overeem just ground and pounded him brutally and finished him via TKO in the first round. And that's his only loss on his MMA resume. Now, I know that Sergei Pavlovich's record in the UFC, it's 5-1 with 5 first-round stoppages. Looks very good, and this is going to be a bit of a hot take, but honestly, it's against a bunch of bums. And I know people are going to say, well, Tai Tuivasa, I get it. Tai Tuivasa is kind of in a weird spot because the heavyweight division, you can get by on a lot of power. Tai Tuivasa almost got finished by Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy got overzealous and got KO'd by Tai Tuivasa. Derek Lewis has been getting by on punching power for very many years. And I know that's a bit of a story of the heavyweight division, but I'm just pointing out, it's not like these are super highly skilled guys or even well-rounded guys. Shamil Abdurakhimov, similar situation, not of a very high skill level at all. Maurice Green, barely even belonged in the UFC. And I believe the heavyweight division is the least skilled division in all the UFC. But even that, I still do believe there is some very good, well-rounded fighters. And I just don't believe, your best win is Tai Tuivasa. Just not a great win in my opinion. But I just want to highlight that, not to say he's not going to beat Curtis Blaydes, but I just want to highlight that I think Curtis Blaydes' resume is much better than Sergei Pavlovich. We're talking Junior Dos Santos. I know he was on the decline. We're talking Alistair Overeem around that same time period that Overeem beat Pavlovich. We're talking Mark Hunt, and the list goes on and on. It's not the greatest resume in itself, but it's much better than Sergei Pavlovich's. So when I look at this fight and I look at avenues to victory for both guys, Pavlovich's avenue to victory is very clear, and I believe there's only one avenue to victory, and that's first or second round KO. Primarily first round KO. We've never seen him go past the first round in the UFC. His cardio is a massive question mark. You look at Curtis Blaydes, I think Curtis Blaydes can win this fight a multitude of ways. Outside of submission, I believe Curtis Blaydes could KO Pavlovich on the feet. He has good power. His striking has evolving. I believe he could out-grapple him to a decision, and I also believe he could take him down and TKO or KO him on the ground. So I think Curtis Blaydes has the advantages in terms of path to victory. And I do think there's one thing about this fight, I mentioned it earlier in the video, that favors Curtis Blaydes, but you could also kind of look at it as a way to favor Pavlovich as well. But this is at the UFC Apex. The octagon is the 25-foot octagon versus the normal size 30-foot octagon, which I hate the UFC is switching the size of the playing field. And that may not sound like much, but that is 44% larger. The 30-foot octagon is 44% larger and 20% wider than the octagon that we are going to see Pavlovich versus Blaydes in. And if Blaydes comes out with a grappling heavy game plan, Pavlovich isn't going to have a lot of room to circle around the cage. When you see those heavyweights, I'll never forget watching Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou at the Apex. They are massive in the Apex cage. And I believe it's a little bit of a disadvantage for Pavlovich considering Curtis Blaydes is more of a grappler. But also for Pavlovich, if he hurts you on the feet, he has the craziest killer instinct and will swarm you looking for a finish. So in that respect, that's a little bit of an advantage if he's able to hurt Curtis Blaydes on the feet. But who knows? That's no guarantee at all. But this fight, what I think it comes down to is you have Pavlovich who has to catch Curtis Blaydes in the first or second round. I don't believe Pavlovich is going to have 5-round cardio. I just refuse to believe it. There's not really any evidence of it. But the fact that he's never gone past the first round, I don't believe he's going to have the best cardio, and heavyweight's not known for fighters having the best cardio. And I think what is ultimately this fight is going to come down to is, can Curtis Blaydes get the takedown? Because if he can get the takedown, I think he can find a finish on the ground. Bare minimum, he can win via decision by out-grappling Sergei Pavlovich. But ultimately, it comes down to basically two outcomes for me. I'm either predicting Sergei Pavlovich via first round KO or Curtis Blaydes via ground and pound TKO in maybe like the third or fourth round or second round, maybe even. And ultimately, I am going to go, my official prediction is going to be Curtis Blaydes. I'm going to go late second round TKO, ground and pound TKO. I just think Curtis Blaydes is so well-rounded. And I think he really only has to worry about the hands and the boxing and the power of Sergei Pavlovich. Fun fact, I've rewatched every single one of Pavlovich's fights. He has never even thrown a kick in his UFC career. He doesn't shoot on takedowns. So the only thing you have to worry about is his hands. Obviously his power that comes along with his hands, but that's the only thing you have to worry about. With Curtis Blaydes, you have to worry about his power. He is a massive heavyweight. You have to worry about his striking. He has ever-improving striking, and he also has the grappling in his back pocket. And Curtis Blaydes does worry me with this pick because sometimes, and we saw it in the Chris Daukaus fight, we saw it even in the Jairzinho Rosenstruck fight a little bit, where he'll be content striking. We saw it in the Derek Lewis fight, and when he started to mix it in, he got hit with a massive uppercut and KO'd. He'll get a little bit too comfortable in the feet, and I do worry about that because if you get too comfortable against Sergei Pavlovich, he will find that shot that hurts you badly and KOs you. But I think Curtis Blaydes will strike just enough to set up the takedown, and I think maybe the first half of the first round will be primarily striking, and I think it'll be kind of even. Maybe Curtis Blaydes gets clipped with a big shot. There's high tension because, okay, we know Pavlovich has nasty power, but I think towards the tail end of the first round, Curtis Blaydes will get a takedown. I think he'll take him down, control him maybe for the last minute, land some ground and pound, and then I think in the second round, after about a minute in the second round, I think he's going to clinch up with him. I think he's going to take him down, and I think he's just going to absolutely dominate him in the second round, beat him up, and I'm going to say a last minute of the second round TKO via ground and pound for Curtis Blaydes. And also, I think when they are fighting on the feet, I think Curtis Blaydes will be chopping that lead leg of Sergei Pavlovich because Pavlovich is very heavy on that lead leg. He's been susceptible to leg kicks in the past, and Curtis Blaydes has a very good leg kick. He's been mixing it in his last few fights, and I think he will be chopping the leg of Pavlovich. And also, I know Pavlovich has that 4-inch reach advantage, but for the most part, he doesn't throw a lot of straight shots. Don't get me wrong. He throws the straight right hand. He pumps the jab a little bit. But for the most part, what he does is he clips you with a big shot, and then he swarms you with looping punches. Curtis Blaydes throws more of straight shots. He pumps the jab. He throws the straight right hand. And I think in this fight, I could even see Pavlovich waiting in the danger and getting KO'd. I saw it in the Tai Tuivasa fight. He could have easily got clipped. Now, ultimately, Tai Tuivasa is a little bit slower. Wasn't able to find the shot because he was getting beat up himself. But Pavlovich leaves himself very susceptible to being countered. And it would not shock me if Curtis Blaydes KOs Pavlovich on the feet because he gets too wild. He lands a shot, he gets crazy, he gets overconfident, and he pushes forward. And even if he does land a shot that hurts Curtis Blaydes, I think Curtis Blaydes, while he's rushing forward, I think Curtis Blaydes will mix in the grappling and be able to get the takedown. I just don't trust that Pavlovich's grappling is good enough to stuff Curtis Blaydes' takedown, to defend in the clinch, when nobody shot a takedown on him in his last 5 fights. Nobody has shot a takedown on him since he fought Alistair Overeem, 5 years ago. So I just don't trust that he's going to have worked on it enough, that he's going to have improved on it enough, and we haven't seen it in the real world. So unless he clips Curtis Blaydes in that first round, I think he's going to get out-grappled. I think Curtis Blaydes will TKO him via ground and pound late second round. I'm going to say ground and pound elbows. He's going to finish him in the second round. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. And thank you so much for watching.